3 years ago, on the day she was supposed to become a wife, her Korean fiancé stood in front of 200 guests and chose her stepmother instead. The black woman who had given him 7 years of her life walked out of that church with a torn dress and a name the family would never speak again. No one expected the quiet old man seated in the front row, the mafia boss who had built the entire empire, to do anything more than look away. 6 months later, that same black woman walked back through the compound gates wearing his ring. By the end of the year, every person who had once called her disposable was forced to bow when she entered a room. She did not return as a bride. She returned as their matriarch. Chapter 1. Nomi Jackson stood in the bridal suite of the Park Hyatt, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror while the second hand on the wall clock ticked past 2:17 p.m. The ivory lace dress had cost $6,400. The custom veil another $1,200. The flowers alone, white peonies and Korean roses flown in overnight, came to $4,800. She had counted every receipt twice the night before, because for 7 years and 3 months she had been the one who managed the numbers while her fiancé Jaehyun Park managed the image. 7 years of cooking his mother's recipes until her hands smelled like sesame oil. 7 years of learning enough Korean to greet his relatives without shame. 7 years of smiling through every side eye that said a dark-skinned black woman would never truly belong in that family. At 2:19 p.m. the suite door opened. It was not her maid of honor. It was her stepmother, Soo-jin. Soo-jin, who had married Nomi's father when Nomi was 19 and had never once called her daughter. Soo-jin, whose perfume always arrived 3 seconds before she did. Soo-jin, who now stood in a champagne-colored gown that matched the wedding palette Nomi had chosen. "You need to come downstairs," Soo-jin said, voice soft the way knives are soft before they cut. "There's been a change." Nomi's fingers froze on the pearl buttons at her wrist. In the grand ballroom, 214 guests were already seated. The string quartet had begun the processional music. Jaehyun stood at the altar in a black tuxedo that fit him the way power always fit him, perfectly. He did not look nervous. He looked decided. When Nomi reached the double doors, the music stopped. Every head turned. She felt the weight of their stares settle on her skin like heat. Jaehyun stepped forward, took the microphone from the officiant, and spoke in the same calm tone he used when closing multimillion-dollar deals for his grandfather's company. "I can't do this," he said. "Not with her." A collective inhale moved through the room. He turned toward Soo-jin, who had followed Nomi down the aisle like a second shadow. "I choose the woman who actually belongs in this family." Soo-jin walked past Nomi without slowing. She took Jaehyun's hand. The guests began to clap, first uncertain, then louder, as if volume could erase the black woman still standing in the doorway in a dress that suddenly felt like a costume. Nomi's father looked at the floor. Her mother, who had flown in from Atlanta with the last of her savings, pressed a hand over her mouth and said nothing. Someone near the front row whispered, loud enough to carry, "I told you she was only temporary." Nomi turned and walked. She did not run. Running would have given them the satisfaction of watching her break. She walked the entire length of the marble hallway, past the ice sculpture of interlocking swans, past the gift table stacked with envelopes that would never be hers, and out into the afternoon heat of Seoul. Her phone rang 17 times on the way to the apartment she and Jaehyun had shared for 4 years. She answered none of them. When she reached the door, the key no longer worked. A typed notice was taped to the frame at eye level. Lease terminated effective immediately. All personal belongings will be held for 72 hours. Contact building management for retrieval. She stood there for 9 full minutes, still in the wedding dress, while the afternoon traffic moved past her as if nothing in the world had changed. By 6:43 p.m. she had taken a taxi to a motel on the edge of Itaewon that charged 68,000 won per night and asked no questions. The room smelled of bleach and old cigarettes. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the lace, and finally looked at her bank account on her phone. The joint account she and Jaehyun had used for the wedding was empty. 0. The personal savings she had poured into the deposit, the dress, the flights for her family, $31,400, was gone with it. Her credit cards had been frozen that same afternoon. She had 214,000 won in cash and a return ticket to Atlanta that was no longer valid because the flight had been booked under Jaehyun's corporate account. At 11:06 p.m. her phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. You were always temporary. Stay gone. She did not reply. Outside the thin motel window, Seoul kept glittering the way it always had, beautiful, indifferent, and completely uninterested in a black woman who had just been erased in front of 200 people who would never apologize. Nomi turned off the light, lay down on top of the covers in her wedding dress, and stared at the ceiling until the numbers on the digital clock blurred. She did not cry. Crying would come later, when the shock finished its work and the real weight of having nothing left finally settled on her chest. For now, she simply existed in the dark, counting the hours until the 72-hour window on her belongings closed, and wondering how a woman was supposed to start over when every door she had trusted had just been locked from the inside. The 72-hour window closed at exactly 2:17 p.m. the next day, the same minute Nomi had stood in the bridal suite the afternoon before. She arrived at the apartment building still wearing the ivory lace dress. The hem was gray from motel carpet. One of the pearl buttons at her wrist had come loose and hung by a thread. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of 214 people clapping for the woman who had taken her place. The building manager met her in the lobby with a single cardboard box and a clipboard. He kept his eyes on the papers, never on her face. Sign here. Anything not claimed by the end of business today will be disposed of according to the leaseholder's instructions. Nomi signed. Her hand did not shake. She had already decided she would not give anyone the satisfaction of watching it shake. The box was lighter than it should have been. Inside, 3 pairs of shoes, a half-empty bottle of the perfume she had worn for 5 years, the pearl earrings her mother gave her the Christmas before her father remarried, and 1 framed photograph from her 2nd anniversary with Jae-hyun. Everything else, her clothes, her winter coats, the laptop that held 7 years of work files and the novel she had been writing in secret, was gone. Where is the rest of it? She asked. The manager finally glanced up, then away again. The leaseholder authorized removal of remaining items yesterday evening. I don't ask questions above my position. Nomi carried the box 2 blocks before her arms began to tremble. She sat on a low concrete wall outside a convenience store, the cardboard edges cutting into her thighs. The afternoon sun was sharp. Across the street, a group of office workers laughed about something on a phone. None of them looked at the black woman in a ruined wedding dress sitting alone with a box that contained almost nothing. She counted what she still possessed. 214,000 won in cash. A phone at 9% battery. A return ticket to Atlanta booked under a corporate account that no longer recognized her name. And the knowledge that her stepmother had already begun erasing her. She was still sitting there when the black Maybach stopped at the curb. The rear door opened without hurry. A man in his late 60s stepped out. His coat was charcoal, heavy and perfectly tailored. Silver touched the hair at his temples. His posture belonged to someone who had never needed to rush for another person in decades. When his eyes found her, they did not widen in surprise. They simply settled, as if he had known exactly where she would be and exactly how little she would have left. Park Do-hyun. Jae-hyun's grandfather. The man the family only ever referred to as chairman. The man whose name was spoken carefully in certain rooms across Seoul and never spoken at all in others. The mafia boss who had built the Park empire with hands that still carried the memory of older, bloodier work. He had sat in the front row at the wedding in complete silence. He had not stood when the guests applauded. He had not looked away when Nomi walked out. He had simply watched. Now he stood 3 feet from her on the sidewalk. "Miss Jackson," he said. His English was precise, the accent light but deliberate. "You will come with me." It was not an offer. Nomi's fingers pressed into the sides of the cardboard box. "I don't need charity." "You have 214,000 won," he replied, voice still even. "A phone that will die within the hour. No keys. No legal claim to the home you lived in for 4 years and 3 months. Your joint accounts were emptied at 4:12 p.m. yesterday. Your credit cards were frozen at 4:19. Your stepmother has already instructed the family attorney to contest any attempt you make to recover the $31,400 you contributed to the wedding. And the return ticket in your name was cancelled this morning." He recited the numbers without checking a phone or a paper. He already knew them. The realization moved through Nomi slowly, like cold water finding every low place. Park Do-hyun continued, unhurried. "You may refuse. If you refuse, I will return to my car and you will not see me again. The city will finish what my grandson and your stepmother began. Or you may get in the car. I will take you somewhere you will not be disturbed tonight. In the morning, we will discuss the conditions under which you may remain longer. Conditions. The word landed between them with quiet weight. Nomi looked at the open door of the Maybach. The driver never turned his head. The street continued its ordinary afternoon. No one stared. In this part of Seoul, people had learned long ago that looking too long at Park Do-hyun's business was an expensive habit. She should have walked away. Every lesson she had learned as a black woman navigating spaces that were never built for her said the same thing. Men who offered safety while speaking of conditions were simply writing a different kind of contract. But the alternative was the motel room that smelled of bleach and old smoke, a phone that would go dark before nightfall, and the certain knowledge that somewhere in the city Jaehyun and Sujin were already telling the story of how easily she had been removed. Nomi stood. She did not thank him. She lifted the cardboard box, walked to the open door and sat inside. The leather was cool. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something older. Park Do-hyun followed. The door closed with a soft, final sound. The Maybach pulled into traffic without a word from the driver. For several minutes neither of them spoke. Buildings slid past the window. Nomi kept the box on her lap like a shield. Then the old man said almost mildly, "You will not contact my grandson. You will not contact your stepmother. You will not attempt to return to the apartment, the company offices, or any property connected to the park name. Those are the first conditions." Nomi kept her eyes on the glass. "And if I break them?" Park Do-hyun turned his head a fraction. For the first time something like genuine interest moved behind his expression. "Then I will place you on a plane to Atlanta myself," he said. "With enough money to begin again, and a permanent understanding that you will never re-enter this country under my watch." The imbalance was absolute. He held the car, the money, the city, the lawyers, and the only door that still stood open. She held a cardboard box and the last pieces of a life that had been publicly dismantled less than 24 hours earlier. Nomi watched Seoul move past the window and felt the shape of her fear change. It was no longer only the fear of being unwanted. It was the quieter, heavier fear of being seen too clearly by a man who had watched her humiliation without blinking, and had decided, for reasons she did not yet understand, that she was still useful. She did not ask what he wanted in return. She already knew the answer would not be simple. And for the first time since she walked out of that ballroom in a ruined dress, she understood that survival from this moment forward would come with a price set by the most dangerous man in the family that had just discarded her. Chapter 3. The Maybach did not take her to a hotel. It left the main roads of Seoul and climbed into a quieter district where the houses sat behind high stone walls and the trees were older than most of the buildings in the city. The gate that opened for them had no visible keypad. It simply parted as the car approached, then closed again without a sound. The house beyond it was not large in the way new money was large. It was long, low, and deliberate, dark wood, black tile, paper screens, and a single courtyard with a stone basin that held still water. Nomi stepped out of the car carrying her cardboard box and felt the temperature drop, as if the property itself refused the heat of the city. Park Do-hyun walked ahead of her without looking back. A woman in a dark uniform appeared, bowed once, and took the box from Nomi's hands before she could protest. Another door slid open. Nomi was led to a guest room that smelled of clean cotton and cypress. The bed was already turned down. A set of simple clothes, soft black pants, a loose gray blouse, slippers, waited on the chair. "Bathe. Change. Eat what is brought to you," Park Do-hyun said from the doorway. "We will speak in 1 hour." Then he left. Nomi stood alone in the quiet room and realized her hands were still clenched. She forced them open. The bathroom was larger than the motel she had slept in the night before. The water ran hot on the first try. She stayed under it until the ruined wedding dress lay in a wet heap on the tile and the smell of Sujin's perfume was finally gone from her skin. When she came out, a low table had been set with rice, grilled fish, banchan, and a pot of tea still steaming. She ate because her body required it, not because she had appetite. Every bite tasted like strategy. Exactly 58 minutes later, a soft knock sounded. The same woman in uniform led her down a hallway of polished wood to a study that faced the courtyard. Park Do-hyun sat behind a wide desk of black lacquer. 2 cups of tea waited. He gestured to the chair across from him. Nomi sat. For a long moment he only looked at her, the way a man looks at a ledger he has already calculated but still prefers to verify. You are wondering why, he said at last. It was not a question. Nomi kept her voice even. You watched them do it. You sat in the front row and let it happen. Now I'm in your house. Yes. I'm wondering why. Park Do-hyun lifted his cup, drank and set it down with precise care. My grandson is weak, he said. Not in the way that shows on a balance sheet. Weak in the way that destroys bloodlines. He wants the appearance of power without the weight of it. Your stepmother is the same. They recognize each other. That is why they chose each other in front of 200 people. It was not love. It was recognition. He paused, eyes still on her. I have spent 41 years building something that will outlast me. I have buried partners, brothers and 2 sons. The only blood I have left who carries my name is a boy who discarded a woman for the performance of it. That is a problem I can no longer ignore. Nomi felt the shift in the room. This was no longer only about shelter. You think marrying me solves that? She asked. I think a woman who walked out of that ballroom without begging, without screaming, and without giving them the tears they wanted is not ordinary. His voice remained quiet. I watched you. Not only yesterday. I have watched the way you carried yourself in this family for the last 3 years. You learned the language. You learned the tables. You absorbed every insult without handing them the satisfaction of a reaction they could use. That is not weakness. That is control. He leaned back slightly. My late wife was the same. Different country. Different skin. Same refusal to break in public. When she died, this family began to rot in small, polite ways. My grandson is the clearest symptom. The confession sat between them, heavy and unadorned. Nomi's pulse moved in her throat. So I'm a correction. You are a decision, Park Do-hyun answered. I am 71 years old. I do not have time for slow solutions. The family needs a spine that does not bend for applause. You have already proven you will not bend. The rest can be taught. He opened a slim folder on the desk and turned it toward her. Inside were documents in both Korean and English. Bank authorizations. Temporary residential rights. A non-disclosure agreement thick enough to end careers. And on the final page a single line that made the air in the room change temperature. Provisional consideration of formal union within 90 days, pending mutual assessment. Nomi stared at the paper. You are proposing marriage, she said. I am proposing structure, he replied. You need protection, resources, and a position from which the people who discarded you can no longer reach you. I need a woman who will not be moved by their noise. The title of wife is the fastest legal and social mechanism available. Everything else, the household, the respect, the eventual authority, can follow if you prove capable. He closed the folder. You have 72 hours to decide. If you refuse, the plane to Atlanta leaves with you on it, and the accounts I open for you will remain open long enough for you to stand again. If you accept, you will live under this roof under the conditions I set. You will not be a prisoner. You will be an investment. And investments are protected. Nomi looked at the man across the desk. The same man who had watched her public erasure without standing. The same man who now offered her the one thing the rest of the family had made sure she lost. A place that could not be taken from her on a whim. Outside, the stone basin in the courtyard held the sky like a dark mirror. Inside, the silence waited for her answer. She did not give it yet. She only closed the folder, rested her hands on top of it, and met the mafia boss's eyes without looking away. I'll take the 72 hours, she said. Park Do-hyun inclined his head once as if he had expected nothing less. Wise, he said. Most people who are drowning grab the first hand they see. You are checking whether the hand belongs to someone who knows how to pull. He stood, signaling the conversation was finished for now. Rest tonight. Tomorrow the real terms begin. Nomi rose. At the door she paused, one hand on the frame. Chairman Park. He looked at her. If I stay, she said, voice low and clear, I will not be temporary. Not again. For the first time since she had entered the study, something that might have been approval moved through his expression. Good, Park Do-hyun answered. Neither will I. Chapter 4. The 72 hours ended at 9 a.m. on the third day. Nomi did not wait for someone to come collect her answer. She walked the length of the polished hallway herself, past the courtyard where the stone basins still held the morning light, and stopped at the open door of the study. Park Do-hyun was already seated. 2 cups of tea. The same black lacquer desk. The folder she had closed 3 nights earlier lay exactly where she had left it, as if no one had touched it in the time between. She sat without being invited. "I'll stay," she said. He did not smile. He only studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Then we begin." The first condition was simple and absolute. She would no longer be Nomi Jackson in any public or private document connected to the Park name. For the duration of the arrangement, she would be registered under his household. A new phone was placed in front of her. Already activated, already locked to a private network. A black card followed, her name embossed in quiet silver. The limit was not written on it. When she asked, Park Do-hyun only said, "There isn't one that will concern you." The second condition was harder. She was not to leave the property without security. 2 men, both silent, both permanently stationed near the main gate. If she needed to go into the city, they went first. If she refused the detail, the gates would not open. "You are no longer invisible," Park Do-hyun told her. "That is both protection and a target. Act accordingly." The third condition landed between them like a stone. "You will attend the family dinner this Saturday." Nomi's hands stilled on the edge of the desk. "The same family that clapped while I was discarded?" "Yes." His voice remained even. "My grandson and your stepmother will be present. So will the senior relatives who watched and said nothing. You will sit at my right. You will not explain yourself. You will not defend yourself. You will simply be there. The rest of the room will adjust." She looked at him. "You're using me to draw blood." "I am using the truth to correct a weakness," he answered. "They believed they could erase you in public and face no consequence. Saturday they will learn otherwise." Nomi held his gaze. The fear was still there, but it had changed shape again. It was no longer the fear of having nothing. It was the fear of walking back into the same room that had broken her, this time under the protection of the one man none of them could openly refuse. "I'll be ready," she said. Park Do-hyun inclined his head. "Good. Because they will not be." The days that followed moved with quiet precision. Nomi was given a full wing of the house. New clothes arrived without her asking. Tailored, understated, expensive in the way that did not announce itself. A tutor came for 2 hours each afternoon to refine her Korean beyond the polite phrases she had learned for Jae-hyun's family. The woman never asked questions about why she was there. No one on the property did. At night the house was almost silent. Park Do-hyun kept to his study or the far courtyard. They took the evening meal in the same room twice, speaking little. He asked her once about the novel she had been writing on the laptop that was now gone. When she told him the premise, a woman who survives a public betrayal by becoming the one thing her enemies cannot predict, he only nodded as if the answer had confirmed something he already suspected. On the morning of the family dinner, a package arrived for her. Inside was a deep emerald dress, simple in cut, severe in its elegance. No jewelry. No apology in the fabric. A note in Park Do-hyun's handwriting rested on top. "They expected you to disappear. We're the opposite." The Park family compound on Saturday evening was lit like a stage. Cars lined the long driveway. Voices carried from the main reception hall. Nomi stepped out of the Maybach beside Park Do-hyun and felt every old instinct rise at once. The instinct to shrink, to soften her posture, to make herself smaller so the room would find her less offensive. She did not. They entered together. Conversation did not stop all at once. It fractured. Heads turned in uneven waves. Somewhere near the center of the room a glass was set down too hard. Jae-hyun stood near the far window with Soo-jin's hand on his arm. The expression that crossed his face was not guilt. It was calculation rapidly rewriting itself. Soo-jin's smile remained perfect and frozen for 3 full seconds before it thinned. An older aunt recovered first and began moving toward Park Do-hyun with the usual greetings. He did not slow for her. He walked Nomi directly to the head of the long table and pulled out the chair at his right hand. The chair that, for as long as Nomi had known this family, had remained empty in honor of his late wife. The room understood the message before anyone spoke it. Nomi sat. Park Do-hyun took his place beside her. Only then did he look across the table at his grandson. "Sit," he said, voice mild. All of you. Chairs moved. Conversations restarted in careful, brittle pieces. Servants began pouring wine. Nomi kept her spine straight and her hands visible on the table. She did not look at Jaehyun. She did not look at Soojin. She looked at the space in front of her and let the weight of the chair she occupied do the speaking. Halfway through the first course, Jaehyun's voice cut across the table, polite and sharp. "Grandfather. I wasn't informed we were expanding the household." Park Do-hyun finished the piece of fish on his chopsticks before answering. "You were informed of many things you chose not to hear. This is not one of them. Miss Jackson is under my protection. The details are not your concern." Soojin's laugh was soft, almost kind. "Protection is generous. Some might call it something else." The table went still. Park Do-hyun set his chopsticks down with deliberate care. When he spoke, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Call it whatever you like in private. Say it aloud again in my presence, and you will discover how quickly generosity ends." No one spoke after that. The rest of the dinner continued under a silence that was not peaceful. It was the silence of people recalculating power in real time. Nomi ate what was placed in front of her. She answered when directly addressed by the older relatives who decided, one by one, that acknowledging her was safer than pretending she was not there. She did not smile for anyone. When the evening ended, Park Do-hyun rose first. The room stood with him. He offered Nomi his arm, not as performance but as fact, and walked her out of the hall the same way they had entered. In the car, the gates of the compound closing behind them, Nomi finally let out the breath she had been holding since she sat down. Park Do-hyun watched the dark road ahead. "You did not break," he said. "I wanted to," she answered honestly. "Wanting is irrelevant. Doing is what they will remember." She turned her face toward the window. The city lights moved past in long streaks. Somewhere behind them, in the compound that had once erased her, the story of the night was already beginning to travel. By morning it would reach every branch of the family. By evening it would have grown teeth. Nomi closed her eyes for a moment and felt the new shape of her position settle around her. She was no longer the woman who had been discarded. She was the woman the mafia boss had placed at his right hand in front of every person who had watched her fall. And the people who had clapped the day she walked out of her own wedding were only now beginning to understand what that might cost them. Chapter 5. The first counterattack arrived 4 days after the family dinner. It did not come as a threat. It came as a package, delivered to the gate of Park Do-hyun's private residence at 7:42 a.m. The security team inspected it, found no explosive or tracking device, and brought it to Nomi while she was still finishing tea in the courtyard. Inside the box was a single item, the ivory lace wedding dress she had left in a wet heap on the motel bathroom floor. It had been cleaned, pressed, and folded with deliberate care. On top of it lay a handwritten note in Soojin's elegant script. "Some things should stay in the past where they belong. Wearing another man's protection does not change what you are. Temporary." Nomi stared at the dress for a long time. The fabric no longer smelled of perfume or motel bleach. It smelled of expensive detergent and something colder, the certainty that her stepmother had gone out of her way to retrieve it, restore it, and return it like a warning. She carried the box to Park Do-hyun's study without knocking. He looked up from a set of documents, took in the open box and read the note once. His expression did not change, but the air in the room tightened. "She's testing the boundary," he said. "She's reminding me of my place," Nomi answered. Park Do-hyun closed the folder in front of him. "Then we will remind her of hers." By noon the same day 2 things had happened. First, the small design firm where Soojin had recently accepted a consulting position, a firm that received quiet, consistent contracts from 3 Park subsidiary companies, was informed that all pending projects were under review. By 3:15 p.m. the contracts had been paused indefinitely. Second, Jaehyun received a formal notice from the family office. His access to the secondary accounts he used for personal discretionary spending had been restricted pending a full audit. The notice was signed by Park Do-hyun himself. Neither action was announced. Both were felt. That evening, Nomi sat across from Park Do-hyun at the low table in the smaller dining room. The house was quiet. Rain had begun to fall against the courtyard stones. "They will escalate," she said. "Yes. And when they do?" Park Do-hyun poured tea with the same unhurried precision he did everything. "Then you will watch. And you will learn how power is actually used in this family. Not the version my grandson performs. The real version. Nomi studied him. You're not doing this only for the bloodline. He met her eyes. No. The single word hung there heavier than a longer explanation would have been. She did not push. Not yet. The escalation came 2 nights later. Nomi had begun walking the inner garden paths after dinner. A small routine the security team allowed as long as she remained inside the walls. The air was cool. Paper lanterns along the path threw soft gold across the stones. She was near the far end of the garden when she heard footsteps that did not belong to the staff. Jae-hyun stepped out of the shadow of the old pine tree. He looked thinner than he had at the dinner. The easy confidence he usually wore like cologne was gone. In its place was something tighter, more dangerous. You shouldn't be here, Nomi said. Neither should you. His voice was low. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Sitting in my grandmother's chair. Wearing his protection like it makes you permanent. I'm not wearing anything, she answered. I'm surviving. Jae-hyun took a step closer. He's using you. Your message to me and to her. When the message is delivered, he'll discard you the same way we did. Only this time you'll have farther to fall. Nomi held her ground. You already showed me how far I can fall. I'm still standing. Something ugly moved across his face. My grandfather has enemies who don't care about family dinners or quiet audits. If they decide you're a weakness, they won't send a wedding dress. They'll send something that doesn't leave a body to identify. The threat landed differently than Soo-jin's note. This one carried the weight of the world Park Do-hyun actually moved in. The world that existed beneath the legitimate companies and the polite public face. Before Nomi could answer, a second set of footsteps approached from the main path. One of the security men appeared, expression blank, hand resting near his jacket. Mr. Park, the man said. The chairman is expecting you in the main house. Now. Jae-hyun stared at Nomi for a moment longer. Then he turned and walked away without another word. The security man waited until Jae-hyun was gone before speaking again. The chairman requests your presence, Miss Jackson. Park Do-hyun was standing at the courtyard window when she entered the study. He did not turn around immediately. He came onto the property without clearance, Nomi said. He threatened me with your enemies. I know. Park Do-hyun's voice was quiet. The cameras recorded everything. So did the microphones near the east path. She stopped. You knew he was here. I allowed him to reach you. He finally turned. I needed to hear what he would say when he believed he still had room to intimidate. He has now shown me the exact shape of his desperation. That is useful. Nomi felt a cold flicker of anger. And if he had done more than talk? Park Do-hyun's eyes met hers without apology. Then the lesson would have been different. And permanent. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of the distance between the protection he offered and the methods he used to maintain it. Nomi crossed her arms. I agreed to structure. I agreed to conditions. I did not agree to be bait. You were not bait. His voice remained level. You were the line. He crossed it. Now he understands the line has consequences. So does your stepmother. The audit on her consulting firm will become a full forensic review by morning. The people who quietly supported their little performance at the wedding will begin receiving notices of their own. He walked to the desk, opened a drawer and took out a slim black phone. He placed it on the surface between them. This one is encrypted. If anything happens, anything, you press the single button on the side. My personal detail will reach you in under 4 minutes anywhere in the city. This is not optional. Nomi looked at the phone, then at the man who had just admitted he had used her presence to draw his own grandson into revealing himself. You're not a safe man, she said quietly. Park Do-hyun did not deny it. No, he answered. I am a man who keeps what he claims. And I have claimed the right to protect you. The difference is important. Outside, the rain that had threatened all evening finally began to fall in earnest, striking the stone basin in the courtyard with a steady, relentless sound. Nomi picked up the encrypted phone. The metal was cool against her palm. She did not thank him. She only closed her fingers around it and met his gaze across the desk. Next time, she said, you tell me when you're drawing a line that runs through me. I won't be the last to know. For a moment Park Do-hyun said nothing. Then the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing she had seen. Understood, he said. In that case, you should know the next line is already being drawn. Your stepmother has requested a private meeting with me. She believes she can still negotiate your removal. Nomi felt her pulse steady into something harder. And will she? Park Do-hyun's eyes were dark and certain. No, he said. But I want you in the room when she tries. Before we go any further into this story, I need to tell you something. There is another story. One we cannot put on YouTube. It's called His Secret. It's an Afro-Korean audiobook about a powerful Korean man and the black woman he was never supposed to touch. The kind of slow, dangerous tension that builds in silence. The kind that makes you hold your breath when they finally cross the line. The kind of story this platform will never allow us to tell fully. Chapter 1 is completely free. If you've been feeling the heat in Nomi's story, if you've been waiting for that moment when power turns into something deeper and far more forbidden, go listen to His Secret, right now. The link is in the channel dashboard. Press pause on this video if you need to. Go listen to the first chapter. Then come straight back, because what happens next between Nomi and the chairman is about to change everything. We'll be right here when you return. Now, back to the story. Chapter 6. The meeting was set for 4 p.m. the following day. Park Do-hyun did not hold it in the main compound. He chose the smaller reception room of his private residence. The one with the long table, the paper screens, and the single window that looked out onto the rain-darkened courtyard. No servants remained inside once the guests arrived. Only the soft sound of water striking stone filled the silence. Nomi entered first as instructed. She wore black, simple, sharp, no jewelry. She took the seat to the right of the head of the table and kept her hands folded in her lap. Her pulse was steady. The encrypted phone sat in the pocket of her blazer like a cold promise. Park Do-hyun sat at the head. He did not speak when the door opened. Soo-jin walked in alone. She had dressed carefully. Soft cream silk, pearl earrings, the kind of gentle makeup that made her look reasonable. She stopped when she saw Nomi already seated, and for a fraction of a second the mask slipped. Then it returned, polished and polite. Chairman, she said, bowing slightly. I didn't realize this would be a group conversation. Park Do-hyun gestured to the chair across from Nomi. Sit. Soo-jin sat. She placed a slim folder on the table in front of her, aligning it with deliberate care. I'll be direct, she began, voice smooth. This arrangement is creating unnecessary tension within the family. Jae-hyun is under pressure. The senior aunts are asking questions. And Miss Jackson, she glanced at Nomi with practiced sympathy. She has already been through enough. Continuing this only prolongs everyone's discomfort. Nomi said nothing. Park Do-hyun watched Soo-jin the way a man watches a ledger entry he already knows is false. Soo-jin opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, bank statements, a proposed settlement figure, and a one-way ticket to Atlanta dated 3 days from now. I'm prepared to be generous, she continued. A clean financial resolution. Enough for Miss Jackson to start over with dignity. In return, she leaves quietly and the family can return to stability. She slid the papers toward the center of the table. Park Do-hyun did not look at them. You speak of stability, he said, after standing in a wedding hall and taking another woman's place in front of 200 people. Soo-jin's smile tightened. That was a private matter between adults. This is different. This involves the reputation of the Park name. The Park name, Park Do-hyun repeated quietly. You speak of it as if you have the right to protect it. The temperature in the room shifted. Soo-jin straightened. I am family. You are a woman who married into a lesser branch and then reached for the center, he answered. You saw a soft target and took it. That is not family. That is appetite. Soo-jin's eyes flicked to Nomi, then back. And what is she? A correction? A statement? You placed her in your late wife's chair, Chairman. People are talking. Dangerous people notice when the head of the family begins making emotional decisions. Nomi felt the words land, but she kept her face still. Park Do-hyun leaned forward slightly. When he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. You mistake calculation for emotion. That is why you will always lose. He reached out, closed Soo-jin's folder and pushed it back across the table. Miss Jackson is not leaving. There will be no settlement. There will be no ticket. And if you attempt to contact her, approach her, or interfere with any resource connected to her again, I will treat it as a direct challenge to my authority. Sujin's composure cracked for the first time. You would choose her over your own blood? Park Do-hyun's gaze did not move. I am choosing the future of this family over the people currently weakening it. You and my grandson have shown me what you are. She has shown me what she is willing to endure without breaking. That is the only comparison that matters. Silence stretched. Sujin stared at him, then at Nomi. The polite mask was gone. What remained was colder and more honest. She will never be one of us, she said softly. No matter what chair you give her. Nomi spoke for the first time. Her voice was low and clear. I was never trying to be one of you. I only refused to disappear when you told me to. Sujin looked at her for a long moment. Then she stood, gathered her folder and smoothed the front of her dress with steady hands. This isn't over, she said to Park Do-hyun. No, he agreed. It is only beginning. And you are already behind. Sujin left without another word. The door slid shut behind her with a soft finality. For several seconds the room remained still. Rain continued against the stone outside. Park Do-hyun turned his head toward Nomi. You spoke. I did. Good. He studied her. She will not come at you directly again. She will look for softer ground, Jae-hyun, the ants, the business contacts who still believe they can move quietly. When she does, you will tell me immediately. Nomi met his eyes. And if I handle it myself? A faint flicker of something, approval or interest, moved through his expression. Then you will handle it completely, he said. Half measures create longer wars. He rose. The meeting was finished. As Nomi stood, Park Do-hyun added, almost as an afterthought. The 90 days began the morning you accepted. We are 11 days in. Use them carefully. He paused at the door. You still haven't told me what happens at the end of 90 days if I decide the structure is not enough. Park Do-hyun looked at her across the quiet room. Then, he said, we will renegotiate from a stronger position. Yours, or mine. The words settled between them with quiet weight. Nomi left the reception room with the sound of rain following her down the hallway, and the clear understanding that the real battle for her place in this family had only just been declared. Chapter 7. The house felt different the morning after Sujin's visit. Not louder. Quieter. As if the walls themselves had absorbed the confrontation and were still holding the echo. Nomi rose early. She walked the inner garden while the stone paths were still wet from the night's rain. The security detail kept their distance. No one stopped her. When she returned to the main hallway, one of the senior staff members, a woman who had never spoken more than necessary, gave her a small, deliberate nod before stepping aside. It was the first time anyone on the property had acknowledged her without being ordered to. Small shifts. But shifts nonetheless. At 10:30 a.m. a sealed envelope arrived for her. Inside was a single sheet of paper from the family office. Formal notification that her residential status under the Park household had been updated in the internal registry. Her name now appeared on the protected list. Any unauthorized approach would be logged as a security event. Park Do-hyun was making the invisible visible. He sent for her just after noon. She found him in the study standing at the window with his back to the door. The black lacquer desk was clear except for two items. A small wooden box and a folded document. Close the door, he said without turning. She did. When he faced her, his expression was the same controlled calm she had come to expect, but something beneath it had tightened. Your stepmother left the compound last night and made 3 calls, he said. 2 to Jae-hyun. 1 to a man who handles private investigations for certain families in Gangnam. She is gathering information on your life before you met my grandson. Old addresses. Old relationships. Anything she can use to paint you as unstable or opportunistic. Nomi felt the familiar cold settle in her stomach. And she will fail. Park Do-hyun walked to the desk and rested 2 fingers on the wooden box. But failure will not stop her from trying to hand the information to people who enjoy damaging women publicly. So we will not wait. He opened the box. Inside lay a simple platinum band. No diamonds, no engraving visible at first glance. Clean. Severe. Final. Nomi's breath caught once, then steadied. The 90 days were always a structure, Park Do-hyun said. Not a promise of slow discovery. The family is moving faster than expected. So will we. He picked up the folded document and placed it in front of her. This is an amendment to the original provisional agreement. Immediate formal registration of marriage under my name. Quiet. Binding. The public announcement can wait until we choose the moment. But the protection becomes absolute the moment you sign. Nomi looked at the papers, then at the ring, then at the man who had just placed both in front of her like pieces on a board. You're accelerating because of her, she said. I am accelerating because I do not lose what I have claimed. His voice remained even. You asked me what happens at the end of 90 days if the structure is not enough. I am answering you early. This is the stronger position. Silence filled the study. Nomi could hear the water in the courtyard basin. She could feel the weight of the encrypted phone in her pocket. She could still see Sujin's face when she realized the chairman would not be moved. She reached out and touched the edge of the document. If I sign this, she said quietly, I am no longer a guest under your protection. I become your wife in the eyes of every system that matters in this country. Yes. And in the eyes of the people who want me gone. Yes. Nomi lifted her gaze to his. What do you become? Park Do-hyun studied her for a long moment. The answer when it came was stripped of performance. The man who placed a black woman the family tried to erase into the center of their power, and refused to let them take her back. The words settled between them with irreversible weight. Nomi looked down at the platinum band. He picked it up. The metal was cool and heavier than it looked. Inside the band, so small she almost missed it, 3 words had been engraved in precise Korean. Not temporary. Her throat tightened once. She set the ring down, took the pen he offered, and signed her name on the final page without trembling. Park Do-hyun watched the ink dry. Then he took the ring, lifted her left hand, and slid the band onto her finger himself. His touch was brief, controlled, and completely certain. It is done, he said. Nomi looked at the platinum against her skin. No, she answered softly. It has only begun. Outside the rain had stopped. Light moved across the wet stones of the courtyard like something newly claimed. Inside the study, the chairman of the Park family and the woman the rest of them had discarded stood on the other side of a line that could no longer be erased. And somewhere in the city, Sujin's phone was about to begin ringing with news she would not be prepared to hear. Chapter 8. The news moved faster than the official channels. By 9:17 a.m. the morning after Nomi signed the papers, 3 senior aunts had already called the family office demanding confirmation. By 10:40 a.m. Jae-hyun knew. By noon, Sujin had locked herself in a private room at a Gangnam hotel and made 6 calls in under 20 minutes. The quiet marriage was no longer quiet. Park Do-hyun did not issue a public statement. He simply allowed the internal registry update to stand. Nomi's name now appeared beside his as legal spouse. The platinum band on her finger was the only announcement that mattered to the systems that controlled money, property, and protection in this country. The first strike came at 3:22 p.m. Nomi was in the smaller sitting room reviewing household account summaries Park Do-hyun had begun placing in front of her each morning when one of the security men entered without knocking. His face was tighter than usual. Chairman requests you in the main study. Immediately. She found Park Do-hyun standing behind the desk with a phone still in his hand. The screen was dark. His expression had gone completely still in the way that meant someone had finally crossed a line he would not forgive. They filed a petition, he said. Nomi waited. Jae-hyun and your stepmother through a secondary lawyer. They are claiming the marriage is invalid on grounds of coercion and mental instability on your part. They attached old medical records from a brief period of counseling you attended 3 years ago after your father's remarriage. They also included statements from 2 former co-workers who claim you spoke of using the Park family to secure your future. The air left Nomi's lungs once, then returned colder. Those records were sealed, she said. They were. Someone paid to unseal them. Park Do-hyun set the phone down. The petition was filed in a court that moves slowly for ordinary people and very quickly for families with the right contacts. If we do nothing, there will be a preliminary hearing in 11 days. They intend to freeze certain joint protections and force a public examination of your fitness. Nomi felt the old humiliation rise like bile. They were not content with discarding her once. They wanted to dissect her in public a second time. What do you need from me? She asked. Park Do-hyun looked at her for a long moment. I need you to decide how hard you are willing to fight. Because the clean version of this ends with lawyers and quiet pressure. The other version ends with the complete removal of their remaining leverage inside this family. There will be no middle ground once I begin. Nomi looked down at the platinum ring on her hand. The words engraved inside pressed against her skin. Not temporary. She lifted her eyes. They tried to erase me in front of 200 people. Now they want to do it again with paperwork and paid statements. There is no version of this where I ask you to be gentle. Something dark and approving moved through Park Do-hyun's gaze. Good. He picked up the phone again and made a single call. The conversation lasted 41 seconds and contained no raised voices. When he ended it, he looked at Nomi. The investigator who unsealed your records will lose his license by morning. The 2 co-workers who sold their statements will receive formal notice of legal action for defamation before the day is over. And Jae-hyun's remaining operational authority inside the Southern Logistics branch will be suspended within the hour. He walked around the desk until he stood only a few feet from her. But that is only the surface. Your stepmother has been using a private fund, money she diverted from one of the lesser family trusts over the past 18 months, to pay for this campaign. I have known about the fund for some time. I allowed it to continue so I could see how far she would go. She has now shown me. Nomi's voice was quiet. What happens to the fund? It disappears tonight. And the trail will lead exactly where I want it to lead. He studied her face. There will be fallout. Jae-hyun will become reckless. Your stepmother will become dangerous in a different way. People who smiled at dinner will begin choosing sides in earnest. You will not be shielded from every consequence. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. Nomi held his gaze. I'm not asking to be shielded. I'm asking to be armed. Park Do-hyun was silent for a moment. Then he gave a single, slow nod. Then starting tomorrow you will sit in on the morning operational briefings. You will have full visibility into the accounts that matter. And when the preliminary hearing date approaches, you will not hide. You will walk into that room as my wife and let them look at the woman they tried to destroy. He reached out and for the first time without ceremony or strategy, adjusted the platinum band on her finger so it sat straight. They wanted a scandal, he said. We will give them a reckoning instead. Outside, the afternoon light had turned sharp and colorless. Inside the study, the quiet marriage had become an open war. And Nomi understood with complete clarity that the people who had once clapped while she walked out of her own wedding were about to learn the true cost of leaving a woman with nothing left to lose, and everything left to claim. Chapter 9. The 11 days before the preliminary hearing did not pass quietly. Park Do-hyun kept his word. The morning operational briefings began the next day at 7 a.m. sharp. Nomi sat at the long table in the secure conference room on the lower level of the residence while senior managers, men who had never expected to report in front of her, presented logistics numbers, cash flow summaries and risk assessments. The first morning 2 of them still addressed every answer to the chairman alone. By the 4th morning they had learned to look at her when she asked a question. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform authority. She simply read the documents thoroughly, asked the numbers that did not add up, and watched how the room adjusted around the new reality of her presence. Park Do-hyun rarely interrupted. He watched her the way he watched ledgers, measuring what held and what required reinforcement. On the 6th evening, after a particularly long briefing that stretched past dinner, Nomi remained in the conference room after the others filed out. The lights had been lowered. Rain tapped against the high windows. Park Do-hyun stayed as well. For a while neither of them spoke. The silence was no longer purely strategic. It had begun to carry something else, a weight that neither of them had named. You're adapting faster than they expected, he said at last. Nomi closed the folder in front of her. I don't have the luxury of adapting slowly. He studied her across the table. Most people in your position would still be reacting to the wound. You are already building on top of it. She met his eyes. The wound is still there. I just refuse to let it be the only thing that defines the room I'm standing in. Park Do-hyun was quiet for a longer moment. Then he did something he had not done before. He dismissed the remaining security detail with a single look and waited until the door sealed shut. I have spent most of my life treating people as positions on a board, he said. The words came without softness, but without the usual distance either. It is an efficient way to survive. It is also a lonely one. My wife understood that. She was the only person who could sit in a room with me and remind me I was still a man, not only a function. Nomi felt the shift in the air. This was no longer about Soo-jin or Jae-hyun or the hearing. And now, she asked. Now I find myself watching the way you refuse to make yourself smaller for the comfort of people who already tried to erase you. His gaze held hers. It is familiar. And it is disruptive. The confession was controlled, but it was real. Nomi's pulse moved slowly in her throat. You placed a ring on my finger to close a vulnerability in your family. That was structure. What is this? Park Do-hyun did not look away. This is me admitting that the structure is no longer the only reason you are still in this house. The words settled between them with irreversible honesty. Nomi stood. She walked around the long table until she was only a few feet from him. She did not reach out. She simply stood there and let him see her fully. The woman who had walked out of a wedding in a ruined dress. The woman who had signed her name beside his. The woman who was learning the weight of the power he had placed within her reach. I will not be a replacement for her, she said quietly. I am not asking you to be. And I will not pretend this is only strategy anymore. I stopped pretending several days ago, he answered. I simply had not said it aloud. For the first time since the Maybach had stopped beside her on that sidewalk, the space between them was not defined by protection or leverage or the next move against their enemies. It was defined by the quiet, dangerous recognition that something real had begun to take root beneath the arrangement. Park Do-hyun lifted one hand and, with deliberate care, brushed his thumb once across the platinum band on her finger. The hearing is in 5 days, he said, voice lower. They will try to break you in public a second time. When they do, I will not be the only one standing in that room with authority. You will speak. And when you speak, the family will understand that the woman they discarded is no longer asking for a place. She is already occupying it. Nomi held his gaze. And after the hearing? Park Do-hyun's answer was quiet and absolute. After the hearing, we stop allowing them to set the pace. You will take the seat that has been waiting. Not as a provisional wife. As the woman this family will learn to answer to. Outside, the rain strengthened against the glass. Inside the conference room, the last of the pure structure between them finished collapsing. What remained was something far more dangerous and far more permanent. Nomi turned to leave, then paused at the door. Chairman. He looked at her. When this is over, she said, I will not be the woman you saved. I will be the woman who stood beside you and made them regret every clap they gave the day I walked out. Park Do-hyun's eyes darkened with something that was no longer only approval. I know, he said. That is why I chose you. Chapter 10. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a private judicial chamber usually reserved for sensitive family and corporate matters. The room was smaller than a courtroom, but the weight inside it was heavier. 3 officials sat behind a long table. Lawyers occupied both sides. Jae-hyun and Soo-jin sat together, dressed in careful respectability. Their expressions were composed, but their eyes carried the sharp focus of people who believed they still had one final blade left to use. Nomi entered beside Park Do-hyun. She did not wear soft colors. She wore deep charcoal, tailored and severe, the platinum band visible on her left hand. She did not lower her gaze when the room turned to look at her. She walked the length of the chamber and took the seat reserved for her as legal spouse of the Park family head. The same people who had once watched her leave a wedding in a ruined dress now watched her sit as if the chair had always belonged to her. The petition was read aloud. Coercion. Mental instability. Opportunistic intent. The old counseling records were entered. The paid statements from former co-workers were entered. Soo-jin's lawyer spoke in measured, sympathetic tones about a young woman who had attached herself to a powerful family and was now being protected beyond reason. Nomi listened without interruption. When the officials finally turned to her and asked if she wished to respond, the room expected carefully managed silence or a short prepared statement. Instead, Nomi stood. She did not look at the lawyers. She looked first at Jae-hyun, then at Soo-jin, and finally at the 3 officials. I will not waste this room's time denying that I was broken in public, she said. Her voice was steady and clear. 214 people watched my fiancé choose my stepmother and then applauded. I walked out with nothing. That part of their story is true. A faint shift moved through the chamber. But the rest is not. I did not ask for Park Do-hyun's protection. He offered structure when I had none left. I accepted it with open eyes. I signed my name. I wear this ring because I chose to. Not because I was coerced. Not because I am unstable. Because the people who tried to erase me left me with one clean truth. I would never again allow anyone to decide I was temporary. She turned her full attention to Soo-jin. You unsealed records that were meant to stay private. You paid for statements meant to shame me. You stood in a wedding hall and took what was not yours, and when that was not enough, you tried to do it again with paperwork. You keep calling me opportunistic. The only thing I have taken is the right to remain standing. Then she looked at Jae-hyun. And you told 200 people I was not enough. You emptied accounts. You locked a door in my face. You came to the house and threatened me with your grandfather's enemies. You have spent every day since trying to make the world agree with the moment you discarded me. It will not work. I am not the woman who left that ballroom. I am the woman who walked back in. Silence held the chamber. Park Do-hyun did not speak. He did not need to. His presence beside her was the final seal. The officials withdrew for 23 minutes. When they returned, the petition was dismissed in full. The records were ordered resealed. The paid statements were flagged for further review. Costs were assigned to the petitioners. Jae-hyun's face had gone bloodless. Soo-jin's hands were locked together so tightly the knuckles had turned white. It was finished. That evening, the senior members of the Park family were summoned to the main compound. No announcement had been sent beyond the required notice. They arrived expecting another closed discussion about the hearing. What they found was the long table already set, the head chair occupied by Park Do-hyun, and the chair to his right, the one that had remained empty for years in honor of his late wife, occupied by Nomi. No one spoke when they entered. Park Do-hyun waited until every seat was filled. Then he stood. The petition failed, he said. The attempt to remove my wife failed. The quiet efforts to undermine her position end tonight. From this moment, Nomi Park is not a provisional presence in this family. She holds full authority as my wife and as the woman who will speak for this household when I am not in the room. Questions about her place are no longer permitted. Challenges to her place will be treated as challenges to mine. He looked slowly around the table, letting the weight of the words settle on every face that had once watched her be discarded in silence. She is the matriarch of this family. Adjust yourselves accordingly. Nomi did not smile. She did not soften. She simply met the eyes of the people who had clapped the day she lost everything, and allowed them to see that the woman they had tried to erase was the same woman now seated where none of them could remove her. One by one the senior relatives inclined their heads. Some did it with stiff reluctance. Some did it with careful calculation. None of them refused. At the far end of the table, Jae-hyun kept his eyes on the surface of the wood. Soo-jin's face was perfectly still, but the defeat in it was complete. Park Do-hyun sat. Nomi remained upright beside him, the platinum band catching the light, the words engraved inside pressing against her skin like a final, private truth. Not temporary. 3 years earlier she had walked out of a ballroom with a torn dress and a name the family refused to speak. Tonight, every person who had watched her leave was forced to acknowledge the woman who had returned. She had not come back as a bride. She had come back as their matriarch. The end.